The Los Angeles Clippers, 51 and 31, fourth seed in the West, lost to Dallas in 6 games in the first round of the playoffs. And after the season and the series ended, there were questions about whether or not this team was going to return as is. Ty Lue, there were questions if he was going to stay. He actually re-signed on a 5-year, $70 million contract. And then there were questions about Paul George, whether or not he was going to stay. And ultimately, Paul George decided that it was time for him to go because he wasn't being offered the contract that he was hoping for by the Clippers. And it's, on the one hand, like you've got this Kawhi, Paul George core that you think is going to give you a title or at least put you in title contention every year. And certainly the Clippers were a title contender for a while last season. They had this sort of hot stretch after the Harden trade, after they figured out how to play with him and Westbrook and Paul George and Kawhi. But there was always sort of questions for me in terms of their size, and they're also in terms of their health, because like Kawhi played 68 games, which is an aberration for him. Like he gets injured all the time. He's actually injured right now, and he missed the Olympics because of injuries, and because of those injury histories, concerns, and just the overall history between him and Paul George. Clippers didn't really feel comfortable offering him a max contract, so he got 3 years, 153 million as an extension midway through the season. Again, Paul George is gone, and now that Paul George is gone, PG and Kawhi, they were 124 and 57 in the regular season together, 13 and 13 in the playoffs, and they won a grand total of 3 playoff series. Not really good for 5 years when you have two guys who are considered superstars. Now that Paul George is gone, it's Kawhi and James Harden's team. Speaking of James Harden, 2 years, 70 million contract, which to me is by far ridiculous. He's 35 years old. He's been on the decline. He's not a superstar anymore for sure. I think he's a borderline all-star. And he's a relatively durable player, sure, but he's played the fewest minutes per game of his career last season. Part of that coming into, he didn't have a full training camp, trade with Philly to Clippers. But I don't see him ever being that guy ever again. And in the playoffs, he'll have like a game or two and then kind of disappear. It happened again against Dallas. He had like one really good game, disappeared. Just I'm done with James Harden being the sort of savior. So back to the Clippers, and I'm just going to kind of rattle through some of the extensions. Harden I already mentioned, Kawhi I already mentioned. Terrence Mann got a new contract, 3 years, 47 mil. Ivica Zubac, new contract, 3 years, 58.6 mil. They lost some guys that were kind of important. They lost Daniel Tice. They lost Mason Plumlee. They lost Russell Westbrook. I already mentioned Paul George. But in their place, they signed Derrick Jones Jr. He's a great signing. He helped Dallas to a finals last year, and he's a good, solid veteran player. They signed Chris Dunn. He's solid. I don't think he's like anything crazy, but he's respectable. They signed Kevin Porter Jr. That to me is a mistake because of his off-court issues, but he shouldn't be in the league. And there are a lot of guys who shouldn't be in the league, players and coaches for similar reasons. But that aside, I do have question marks about Kevin Porter as a ball stopper and defensive player. So the off-court stuff should eliminate him from the NBA, but it's not going to. So we're stuck with it as NBA people. So yeah, take it as it is. But as for the rest of the roster, you've still got PJ Tucker. I think he's kind of on his way out of the league. He's getting too old to really contribute meaningfully. And then you've got Mo Bamba, who, it sounds nice on paper. Oh, another center, but he just keeps not getting minutes everywhere he goes. And I have to wonder if he's going to play for the Clippers. They certainly need a size. They certainly need a center, especially since they play these small lineups. And I imagine they're going to try and play more Kawhi at the 4 again this year. But I want to see more like size, like Derrick Jones Jr. at the 4. I want to see, DJ if he can contribute. I don't want to see these like 4 guard lineups anymore. I didn't think they worked. They had some success with it, but I just don't think you can go deep into the playoffs with that. And I just I think if I look at the Clippers roster, they have improved their defense. Like yes, they lose Paul George, but they have a ton of like solid role players. Norm Powell's still there, and I mentioned Terrence Mann, Zubac, etc. But there's no real like star power. And again, Kawhi's gonna miss games. Harden is getting older. It just doesn't. It's not a recipe for like playoff success. It's kind of a problem if you're the Clippers though, because on the one hand, your pick is controlled by the OKC Thunder and a bunch of other teams as a cascading pick swap. It's weird, but you're not really going to get a good first round pick out of that. So no control over your pick. And they're not, let me check their apron. They're under the first apron, but that doesn't really help them much. And there is sort of a desire to win because they just opened their new arena, the Intuit Dome, which is they're going to play for the first time this year in the Intuit Dome. Normally, when a team has a new arena, they want to sell tickets, have tons of fans, that sort of thing. But the West is too good, and I don't see the Clippers getting into that mix. At best, they are a playoff team, maybe 6, 7, 8 seed. I think they're more in the play-in contention, and there's always a chance they slip even further because their defense improved, but their offense got worse. Like shooting's a little bit of a concern. They have some shooters, sure, but they don't have a lot of playmaking. They don't have a lot of just overall offense. So they're really gonna have to win these ugly, grinded out defensive battles. And I'm not so confident that they're going to be able to do that in the Western Conference. So to me, they're a playing team and they're going to have one try at trying to succeed, then maybe some free agency next year. But I wouldn't expect too much from the Clippers if I were a Clippers fan this year.